your body just kind of gets to the point where you can't do the things that you want to do because your feet are failing you and they're weak. So you're just going to be injury prone at that point. A lot of these guys are coming back early from injuries when they shouldn't have, and they're getting hurt because their body wasn't healed to begin with. And no matter how many painkillers or pain shots these guys get, there's only so much that it can do before your body just shuts down and causes scar tissue in these joints, whether it's your knee, whether it's your ankle. If you tear your hamstrings a bunch of times, you're just not going to be the same player, not have the same explosiveness. It comes down to how's the base of your body, how's the strength in your feet, is that stable? No matter what health or fitness game you play, just like I predict injuries on the field for my fantasy teams, I want to help you in your game as well. I want to help you reach your goals. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm recruiting the ultimate fantasy team, and I want you to be a part of it.
Hey, fitness and health fans, it's game on with another episode of the Sporting Good Posture podcast. Get Coach Margella's advice from the sidelines as he helps you crush your game, no matter what health or fitness game you play.
Hey, I'm Coach Margella. I'm sporting good posture. What are you sporting?
Hey, Coach Margella, what's your advice today?
Welcome back to another episode of Sporting Good Posture. This is Coach Margella, and today's episode I'm going to be speaking about some recent injuries in the pro sports world. Most specifically is the Kevin Durant injury, and when he got hurt during the playoffs, this didn't surprise me because, first of all, he came back a little bit too early from his injury, but also the fact that the underlying issue really was his feet. And we've talked about the feet before. We've talked about the importance of the posture of your feet and your arches and the imbalance that happens above that. But this is a common theme for many of these athletes because these guys have flat feet. And when they have flat feet, the problem that happens is it creates that imbalance and then their bodies just shut down. So we've seen it from Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant in the past, and there's been several other athletes that have had these Achilles injuries. And many of these are preventative because, again, they don't have the proper supports in their feet. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the shoes that they're wearing or the conditioning that they have, but really this is a big problem. We saw him go down, and now he's going to be out the next year. And, he moved over to Brooklyn in the offseason and signed the deal over there with Kyrie Irving to team up. But it's going to be a year before we see any of those guys together in action because he's got a rehab. And he may come back before the end of next season. But the problem is once these guys get these Achilles injuries, they're never the same. And history shows that anybody in their 30s that have had this Achilles injury is usually not the same kind of athlete once they come back. It makes a big difference in their explosion as far as, off the dribble. It makes a big difference in their ability to jump, for their jump shots and also for landing. But the biggest thing is that, the explosion factor slows down and the conditioning becomes harder because their body just can't go as fast as they used to. Kevin Durant's obviously a special athlete and he's been a stud in the league for over 10 years now, but if this is going to be lingering for him, he just may not be the same scorer that he was. So he may end up changing his game. So some of the things that he might do is instead of driving to the basket like he used to, he may start doing more turnaround jump shots or post shots and just post up a lot instead of having to drive because he won't have that same power and explosiveness when he tries to drive to the rim. And also, he may not be as good at three-point shots like he has been. He may not be able to rise up as much after the shots or do the fadeaway shots that he does with somebody that's guarding him close, and he may not be able to do those same kind of moves that he did. So it's something that he'll still be a great player, but he just may not be the exact same player. And this is a common theme with other sports as well. Like we've seen somebody like Albert Pujols. This guy during 2000 to 2011 was an absolute beast with the Cardinals. And when he moved over to the Angels, the Cardinals were smart not to give him that contract because now it's just an albatross of a contract. And he's had so many foot problems. He's had surgery on his foot twice. He's not the same player anymore. He doesn't have that explosiveness on his swing. And it's all due to the lack of support in his feet. And, I've told you guys before, I'm a big fantasy player. And I draft my team according to these injuries. And also I can predict better than most about their recovery time. So if somebody gets hurt the year before, somebody gets hurt mid-season, I kind of have an idea of, how well they're going to do. So I feel like I have an advantage with that. A lot of times with fantasy sports, if any of you guys have played out there, they're not always forthcoming with these injuries because they don't want the other teams or the league to know if somebody's hurt or if there's any kind of obstacles that they're going to face when the person plays, or, especially if it's football, they're not going to tell them, what knee it is or what's going on, because they don't want the other teams just, diving at somebody's knees or ankles because they know that it's already injured. But as far as baseball, like I was saying with Albert Pujols, that problem with his feet is really compromising his swing and also his power. And he's not able to generate the same kind of speed that he used to have. I mean, he's also an aging player, so that's part of it. But with his feet, his base is off. So when the base is off, he's not going to have a strong swing after that. And unfortunately, I used to pick him a lot on my fantasy teams, and I don't anymore. Speaking of fantasy, we're right in the middle of baseball season, and I've been doing really well this year. So my team so far is 11-2, and it's really been one of my better teams. And going through some of the guys that I have on my team, my pitching has been phenomenal this year. I have 4 of the top 6 starting pitchers right now in my fantasy league. And I was able to draft those guys and just, I knew how they do in the past. And obviously that's not always an indication of how well they're going to do in the future. But I also look at some uptrends on some of these players to see, where they're going to go. And actually, I'm looking at my app right now. I'm actually 12-2. I forgot I won last week again. So I'm 12-2. I'm in first place, and I'm going to be making the playoffs. So my hope now is that, these guys stay healthy. So just this week, Max Scherzer is a guy on my fantasy team. He's a starting pitcher in the league. He's probably the number 1 starting pitcher, and he's got a back strain. He's got a mid-back strain going on right now. And I'm not so much worried about that because, if you've ever been to the doctor or you follow these things, a strain of a muscle is much better than a strain or a sprain of a ligament. A muscle has much better blood supply than a ligament or a tendon. So if you injure a muscle, it's usually, a couple weeks maybe on the disabled list. But if you sprain a ligament, like in an ankle or a knee, or if you damage a tendon in the shoulder, you're looking at possibly months, maybe even years, and even a surgery that might happen out of an injury like that. So him going down this week with a mid-back strain, I think it's more a protective thing because they want him for the end of the season more, so they're probably giving him a little rest anyway. Stuff like that is just things that I look at when I'm looking at these players. And so far my team's been well because, again, I've also picked guys that aren't injury-prone. So this is actually one of the first major injuries I've seen. I had another guy break his finger, which is not a predictable thing. He slid into second. But these are the kind of things that I look for. And sometimes it's worth taking a chance on some guys that have had injuries in the past because their play when they're not hurt is worth the time if they're on the field for a bit, and then they might have to go on the table list a little bit. But there's a guy, a pitcher on the Dodgers, his last name is Ryu, and he's had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, and I actually picked him. I'm in a couple of fantasy leagues, but the one I picked him in that I'm doing really well, and he hasn't been hurt, and he started the All-Star game. So I knew that he had the talent to do that, and as long as he stayed healthy, it was worth it. Now, he's had some groin injuries, which usually people can recover from better than, like a disc problem in the back or an elbow problem or a shoulder problem. So I was willing to give him a chance because I wasn't as scared off about a groin injury as I would have been with like a shoulder or an elbow injury or something like that. And these are the kind of things that if you do play fantasy sports, you want to look at. And I'm going to be talking more in the future here about, fantasy sports. I'm big into fantasy baseball and football, so those are the main things that I do as far as fantasy sports. But I follow basketball and hockey religiously as well. You guys know I'm a big Predators fan. Now I grew up in New York, so I was a Rangers fan for a long time, and I'm still a New York Giants fan from years ago. And now that I've lived here in Tennessee for 12 years, I follow the Titans. So it's good that I have those kind of teams around me, so I'm able to stay involved with sports. And I go to a lot of the games, and that's a huge factor into why I became a chiropractor, is because I had sports injuries in high school, which really led me to be going to a chiropractor since then. And it really was something I wanted to help other athletes in the future when I became a chiropractor. So that's the thing that I'm still doing. I'm seeing some patients in my office, and my goal is to get some more, pro athletes in here because I feel like I can help them, especially with the fact that I do things with the feet. We do the foot levelers inserts for people's feet, and that's been a huge game changer, whether you're an athlete or whether you sit at a desk or whether you run marathons or whether you just, walk up and down the street just for some exercise. There's inserts for anybody's kind of shoes, and I feel like that's a big thing that can help. And most people's arches are damaged, and most people have that imbalance pattern. They just don't know it yet. And, we've talked about looking for that in the mirror. Basically, you can see a lot of that. But also, if you look at the bottom of your shoes, look at the wear pattern on the shoes. Take a look. Put the shoes side by side, and you'll see a lot of times the outside edge of the right shoe might be worn down, and it's not worn down on the inside, and the other side might not be worn down. You know that your foot's turning out too much when you're walking. Or a lot of times I see on the inside back of the heel part of the shoe is worn down, sometimes not only on the right but on the left. And that means when you're walking, you're really turning your foot inward and dragging your heel as you walk. Most people, I watch them walk, and they're not walking correctly. Most people just kind of slide their feet forward. They don't actually pick up their foot and walk and have that motion in there. And I see that a lot because either A, you've had some damage to your arches, you've had maybe some ankle sprains, or also the bones in your feet can move out of position. And if your foot is locked up, if those bones are out of position, you're not going to have full range of motion in your feet. So you're not going to be walking correctly, and you're definitely not going to be running or jumping correctly. So again, you're setting yourself up for injuries. And these are the type of things that if you just don't know that those are going on, you get checked out, you can figure out if those bones are stuck. There's so many little bones in the feet and so many little bones in the wrists that it's easy for one of them to go out of position and cause an injury, or at least predispose you to one of those injuries. And those are the kind of things that if you have that, you're not going to perform at your highest level, whether it's pro or just, if you're just trying to run a 5K on, Thanksgiving Day or something like that. And these are the kind of things that really hold people back from being healthy and just make a big difference in their body. And again, that really is the basis. What we're talking about more is posture. And ultimately, your posture suffers as a result of poor foundation in your feet and just predisposing you to injuries that will cause you not to be at your best. As far as pro athletes, like I said, most of these guys are not taking care of their feet, and they wear these cleats that are very restrictive, and they have the tools to do these, but most people don't take the time to really train and strengthen their feet, because the shoes that they're wearing actually make their feet lose the strength that's supposed to be in the arches. So that's why they collapse. And then what happens is your body just kind of gets to the point where you can't do the things that you want to do because your feet are failing you and they're weak. So you're just going to be injury prone at that point. The way to train your feet is actually doing things barefoot. If you run in the sand, that's a great way to strengthen your feet. If you ever try running in the sand, it's really hard because you're pushing so hard against the sand that it's hard to actually get any traction. And that's a good thing if you're trying to train your feet. But most people, as they get older, they're not going to have the time or the ability to go do that, and they're not going to be able to strengthen their feet. So that's why at that point it's better to support them, because you usually can't strengthen them back to 100% once they've been damaged. They basically can't come back to full tensile strength at that point because you've made them so flat that it won't reform that arch that you used to have. So again, that's why we recommend supporting the feet at that point rather than strengthening them, because probably once you hit your mid-20s, it's really hard to actually strengthen those areas again. Football season's coming here, so we're less than a couple weeks away from the first NFL preseason game, and fantasy football is huge. So I'm going to have probably 4 teams. My wife always complains about me playing too many fantasy football leagues, but honestly, I do really well in them. I enjoy them a lot, and I've won them a lot. So I like doing it because I feel like I know these injuries, and I've done really well with predicting the comebacks of these players, as well as people that I just stay away from because I know that they're going to get hurt, and I don't feel like dealing with them on the injury list the whole year, so I try to stay away from them if possible. But also I know who to take a chance on that might come back and be stronger. Like last year, Andrew Luck, I had him on some of my teams wherever I could get him, and everybody was worried about his shoulder, but the amount of time that he took off and the strengthening program that he did, even if he wasn't at 100%, just say he was at 80, 85, 90% of what he used to be, that's still better than most of the quarterbacks in the league. So even if he can't chuck it, 60 yards now, maybe if he can, get a good 50-yard, 40-yard passes, the game has changed so much that, they're not chucking it deep as much as they used to. They're usually, dinking and dunking their way down the field. So if you look at somebody like him and another guy like Peyton Manning in the past that had those shoulder injuries and the neck problems that he had and the loss of strength in there, he wasn't the same quarterback when he went over to Denver. But the dude threw, 50 touchdowns when he came back, and he was just as good as he was then. He just couldn't chuck it deep anymore. But honestly, it doesn't matter because the game has changed so much that you can throw shorter passes and still win. And you can still drive down the field. And honestly, these short passes are turning into what the running game used to be, where these guys would run the ball, 30, 40 times a game, where now they're passing it 40 times a game and maybe running only 20 times a game. So it's turning to where the quarterback can throw these short passes and it's not changing the game as much as, throwing deep anymore. So Peyton did that and he was fine. And he couldn't throw it as far and he couldn't, throw the deep outs anymore like he used to, but it didn't matter. He won another Super Bowl with almost a noodle arm at that point. So it really makes a difference if what's the ability of this guy and what he can be at 80% compared to somebody else at 100%. There's some quarterbacks in the league that don't get hurt, but they're still not that good to hang with these other guys in the top 10. Somebody like Drew Brees years ago that had that major shoulder injury, and New Orleans gave him a shot to go and play for them, and the guy's been unbelievable since he's been over there. I mean, he's throwing for almost 5,000 yards a year. He throws for 30, 40 touchdowns a year, and he's very accurate in his throws, and the guy's just a master. You look at somebody like Brady, he's still around he's over 40 now, and he's definitely on the rare side of it because he's been so good. But if you take care of your body, it'll take care of you. And this guy wins Super Bowls and throws to receivers that we don't even know their names half the time, but because he's so good, he finds a way for them to get open because he'll make them open. He'll know where they're at, and he'll make them get open the way he throws it. You see these back shoulder throws, you see all these things, and I've talked about this before in the episode I was talking about with my lawn that was dying, and I said that it's repetitive things that happen that is not by chance. Brady is probably out on the beach during the summer on vacation with these guys throwing patterns in the sand because he wants to make sure that they're all on the same page when the season starts. And that's a big thing for football, is just that timing thing. So again, you don't have to have the strongest arm. You just have to be able to repeatedly do the same motions and practice enough where you know where the guy's going to be and you trust that he's going to catch the pass when you throw it to him. So as far as fantasy, that's coming up soon. So I'll be talking a lot more about that because I'll be, like I said, in 4 leagues, and I'll be drafting all throughout, the end of August. So I'll have a lot of guys to talk about. And the biggest thing with football is there's always injuries. Every week there's injuries. And there's times that I haven't won a championship because some of my best guys got hurt right at the end of the year. So unfortunately, there's times that you just can't always predict things. But as far as these injuries, there's some guys that are coming back from last year that might be better than they were last year because people aren't thinking about them. When I get more into football, I'll talk a little bit more about who I'll be drafting and players that I'm going to be looking at and players I'm going to be staying away from. So over the next month here, I'm going to be studying that more and watching these guys in preseason and training camp. And towards the end of August here, I'll be making my decisions on who's going to be on my team. And a lot of times my teams are the same. I listen to fantasy radio a lot on Sirius XM, and I get some advice on there. But overall, I usually go with my gut, and I usually go with what I see. And I'm usually right about a lot of these things. So I'll draft a lot of the same guys on teams, and they say don't do that, but I actually like doing that because I'm usually pretty confident about them staying healthy or doing well that I'll pick them 2 or 3 out of 4 teams to make sure that I get him. Because if there's a guy I want, I'm going to make sure he's on my team. So I'll be talking more about, the fantasy draft and, all these football players as the year goes on. And I'll get more into, their injuries when they happen, and I'll be able to break down some of those injuries. But I'll tell you right now, with training camp starting, these guys are already getting hurt, and you see these hamstring injuries like crazy. And part of it is a conditioning thing now that these guys aren't going to camps as much. They don't have as many practices. They're not doing as much conditioning as they did. And now also the problems with the cleats and the structure, those are just restrictive on the feet. And a lot of these guys are coming back early from injuries when they shouldn't have. And so now they're getting hurt because their body wasn't healed to begin with. And no matter how many, painkillers or pain shots these guys get, there's only so much that it can do before your body just shuts down and it causes scar tissue in these joints, whether it's your knee, whether it's your ankle. If you tear your hamstrings a bunch of times, you're just not going to be the same player, not have the same explosiveness. And again, it comes down to how's the base of your body, how's the strength in your feet, is that stable? I'm a huge Giants fan, so like I said, I saw Beckham last year, and over the last few years, the guy's an amazing player, but he can't stay on the field. I think the best thing the Giants did was get rid of him. Honestly, there might be differing opinions on that. This guy's going to be injury prone the rest of his career, and I'm calling it right now because he's never going to stay healthy for a full season. He's never going to reach the potential that he had, and he's not going to be the player that he thought he was going to be and that everybody else thought he was going to be. He'll have flashes of greatness, and we go back to that one-handed catch he made a number of years ago that put him on the map. But really, other than that, what has he done since then? He's had a lot of injuries. He's missed a lot of time. He's had ankle injuries, hamstring injuries, knee injuries. Some of them are from hits, but a lot of them is just from poor conditioning and predisposition to injuries. So I'll tell you right now, I never draft Odell Beckham, and I'm not drafting him this year. The guy's not going to stay on the field. He's also never on the same page with his teammates as, like even in New York and now going to Cleveland, he hasn't been practicing with these guys. So I'm telling you right now, that's a guy I stayed away from when I'm drafting because he's either going to be hurt or he's going to be complaining, and he's going to be a locker room problem. So either way, he's not going to be as productive as he should be with that kind of talent that he has. But again, he's never going to be a guy that stays healthy all year, and it's always going to nag him with those injuries. I've watched him for years, and I wish him the best over there. And hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong because I think that he's going to have those injury problems basically the whole career. And they're not going to get the player that they thought they were when they traded for him. So that's just one guy I know right off the bat before I even look at these draft boards that I'm staying away from. So I've spent a lot of time at school, and I've spent a lot of time studying these injuries, and I'm really, like I said, I'm really into fantasy sports, but ultimately I'm here to help you. So no matter what health or fitness game you play, I want to help you live the life that you want to lead, and I want to help you stay healthy. And just like I predict injuries on the field, for my fantasy teams, I want to help you in your game as well, whether it's you sit at a desk all day or whether you actually do marathons or play in sports. I want to help you reach your goals. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm recruiting the ultimate fantasy team in my community, in my practice, and I want you to be a part of it. This is going to be an exciting season. There's a lot of things I'm going to be speaking about, and I have a lot of guests on the horizon that I'm going to be having on the show, and a lot of solo episodes that I'm going to release here. And I want to talk to you more about things that you want to hear. So reach out to me at Sporting Good Posture on Instagram. If you're frustrated, if you're just trying to figure out what's going on, DM me and tell me what's going on, and I'll tell you what I think, and I'll give you the advice that you need. I just want to keep you in the game. Remember, the coach's door is always open. I'm Coach Margella. I'm Sporting Good Posture. How about you?
The Sporting Good Posture podcast is a broadcast wellness production powered by Ideal Health and Wellness Center. All content copyright 2019, all rights reserved. Executive producer Frank Sardella. Dr. Margella appears courtesy of Ideal Health and Wellness Center in Cool Springs. For more information, visit sportinggoodposture.com or follow Coach on Instagram at sportinggoodposture.
I think I'm going to do your season 2 promo up here on the wall. It's going to be great. It's badass. It's really, really cool.
Jamin goes, "Could you grow up, Evan?" I'm like, no.